Well, hello there, and welcome to another awesome build video, this time the Fw C.30A from MiniArt in 1/35th scale. Let's begin, shall we? A while ago I made a review video of this exact model. You can check out the link in the description of the video or in the cards up above, popping right now. And you can see that if you're more interested in what's inside the box. However, in this video, as you can see, we are building the darn thing. There are many questions I would like to answer in this video, especially of the pros and cons for this model, what are its strengths and weaknesses, and how well or not does this thing go together. Well, the pros of this model, of course, it's a 1/35th scale model, which means it's pretty big, and the accessibility of parts and gluing them together is relatively simple, straightforward, and easy. Also, this model offers lots of detail that a 1/72nd scale model of this type does not show. Another very neat feature about the model that it has photo etch parts that enhance the look of the model. And just like I mentioned in the review video, the instruction manual for this particular model is fantastic. It is straightforward, simple, not congested, and it glides you through the build process with ease. But there are also some drawbacks to this model, some cons if you say. And the first of which is a smaller one, and it's its price. It's not exactly an overwhelmingly expensive model, but it's not a cheap model as well. For what it is, I think it could be a little bit less expensive, but that's just my opinion. And while the build process is fairly enjoyable, I would give it a 7 out of 10. There is that little -3 that is bugging me, and the most annoying aspect of the build were the landing gear and the antenna that goes on it. Another more challenging part of the build were the photo etch parts, which are very numerous and very small and very complex, especially when it comes to the assembly of the cockpit, which is also very interesting in its design, which I wouldn't say is great, but it is what it is. The challenge here was the photo etch assembly, the belts that go on the seats. These are basically made from two parts and you have to glue them together. Now, I don't know exactly how to do this correctly without, well, destroying the detail on the surface, because the belts have some surface detail and they have little tiny holes that get covered up with super glue, especially if you have thick super glue. So maybe thinner super glue would work, or lacquer, but I used lacquer on one set and it didn't really work that well because it kind of fell apart. Maybe I should have used more of it. So if anybody knows a better job of gluing these two parts together or attaching these two parts together, please let me know down in the comments below. Just like with all my build videos, I'm going to be using fast forward on the more tedious parts, painting and assembly, just so that this video is bearable to watch and under 30 minutes. Whilst I've been going on about the model, we've seen a couple of frames where I assembled the motor heads and the exhaust, and then started to build the cockpit and putting the seats and the floors, which actually weren't needed because you really don't see it because it gets covered up, but I did it anyway. And then I attached the seat belts and the harnesses to the seats with super glue. I would recommend super glue, very quick setting super glue, otherwise you're just gonna have to be fiddling around too much. And of course I had to bend this buckle, the seat buckle, belt mechanism, I don't know how you said, but I use these tweezers for bending photo etch parts. In hindsight, it might have been a little bit of a too big of a hook. I could have used a smaller tweezers, but I didn't have them, so that's how they look and that's how I did it. So yeah, again, gluing them on the side of the seat is a little bit of a challenge because you have to kind of eyeball it to make sure that it kind of fits with the overall design. And once it's set, it looks like this. Here I'm using Fix on an empty Tamiya jar to fix in place the hand levers, or the mechanism on where the hand levers go, and I had to cut them out from this little photo etch part thingy. And these are very small, very tiny parts that you have to bend into shape. The hand lever portion, you just bend it over and make a lever, and then of course attach them with super glue on its basin. And that is difficult because if you don't have very strong super glue, which sets quickly, it's gonna go all over the place. And for that instant, I was using Fix, which is really fast, really strong, and it really works well in this sort of applications. And because I was a bit of a klutz, one of the levers just flew away whilst I was handling the jar, and I've never seen it since. It's probably in Valhalla with the gods in the vacuum cleaner. The craziness with photo etch doesn't stop there, it continues in the cockpit area mostly, where you have to cut out these two levers that go on the subframe or the frame of the cockpit assembly. And again, I'm using super fast glue and a fairly steady hand to put it in a place, making a little bit of an offset so it looks more realistic. There, ain't it pretty? Now it was time for all the individual cockpit pieces to come together in a symphony called the Cockpit Assembly. While this symphony might be good on paper, it's not really that great in real action, because it's like a symphony where that one little tuba guy is just going a little bit off, or the one violin is going like, ah, I'm not playing with you guys. And that's how I would describe the cockpit assembly, because it's although it's good, it's not great. After the build was complete, I primed the seats to unify them and then proceeded to paint the cockpit. I didn't prime the cockpit elements apart from the seats because I really didn't need to, because the paint really covered very well, so yeah, it works. Lovely jubbly, and here they are, all painted in nice green. Now I had to put this little nub on the instrument panel and paint it in flat black. I think this is the compass, which I glued on this little block. Then I painted in white on the top, masked the white portion off, and painted in flat black on the base. If you're gonna build this model yourself, please do yourself a favor and glue this on the cockpit floor and hand paint it. And then I proceeded to paint the engine and exhaust with black, as one does, and then went over with the metallic color of aluminium. These enamel metallic paints from AK Interactive are absolutely fantastic. They're my go-to paints for any metallic surfaces. They spray very well and they dry very quickly. But the only drawback is that they stink to high heaven, so please ventilate your area very well, otherwise you will be feeling a little bit nauseated. To make the engine a little less boring, I used metal gray from Tamiya and painted the hub and the exhaust pipes. To make them more shady, get it? Shady. I used Panaline enamel paint from Tamiya to basically just make artificial shades in the motor head so they stand out more. Next, I used another very good product, engine grime from MIG, which I just plopped on and made it more dirty so it's not that clean and factory fresh. And used some rust pigment on the exhaust to make it more rusty. I might have gone a little bit overboard with the rust here, so just keep in mind to go easy on it. And oh yeah, I also bored out the hole for the exhaust so that it looks more realistic, because it's just, well, blank. And here it is. It's bored out. Fantastic. I'm using basalt gray because that's what I had for painting the belt buckles and harnesses on the seats. It's not the one that it's specified, but it works fine. These paints have very good pigmentation and are very well suited for hand painting. And with the final touches done, I just secured the cockpit with a spray of semi-gloss clear from AK Interactive Real Color. With the cockpit finished, this portion was a little bit more easier and a little less tedious than the cockpit assembly. It went together fairly quickly, and I decided to display the cockpit doors open so you can see inside the cockpit very easily. Yet again, this portion of the build demands that you use some photo etch parts to enhance the look, and this time only 2 of them, which are these little half dividing walls between the pilot and the co-pilot seat. Here comes the bride, all dressed in green. Yeah, the marriage of these 2 parts finish the overall look of the model, where the 2 fuselage halves come together in a marriage of 1 and make this a proper autodriver Fw C.30A. Now we come to the part of the build that's more of a faff than anything else. These mounts for the rotor heads are pretty, well, they're not very elegantly designed, and it caused me a great deal of anger to make it work correctly, and I lost a lot of time just making these 2 pieces come together as one. I eventually made it work and got them to stick together, and in a way that it doesn't look that bad, but I think that Miniart should really redesign this whole rotor assembly thing a little bit better. Ladies and gentlemen, here we come to the biggest failing of this model, and these are the landing gear assembly and the antenna that goes on one side. These antenna has to be attached on the side, and I had to cut inside the legs to make it work. I would recommend that you make a deep cut, otherwise the antenna is always going to fall off. Also, the rotor assembly and the rotors, they could be a little bit better designed. I had some trouble attaching the rotors to their mounts, and of course these little photo etch parts. I make it look easy here, but it took many takes to make this right. However, I managed to make it work, and I didn't lose much sleep over it. So here are the 3 rotor blades, all ready to be assembled into one. Now, you can tackle this problem in 2 ways, either attaching the landing gear after painting or before painting. But because the landing gears are designed very poorly, and they're designed in 3 parts, so you have the main landing gear and then the 2 struts that you have to attach kind of willy-nilly from the body, I decided to go before painting, which was really a bit of a faff, and it took quite a long time to make it work. I think that this should really be redesigned in a much better way, maybe in just 2 pieces or 1 solid piece. because otherwise it just annoys the hell out of you, and I think it would be much easier if they would redesign this. Really, just please redesign it. Now I really love this part because it's just painting, and it's pre-shading first with black, and after that I sprayed over with white in several layers to hide the pre-shading and just make it subtle enough to see through but not in your face. For inspiration and guidance, I used the box art. The propeller was painted in 3 layers because it has red stripes on either end of the blades. So first was red, then came the black whilst masking the red stripes, and then of course the white tip on the end. I decided to use smoke paint to make certain panels a little bit more darker, and also to make some post shading because I did cover a little bit too much of the pre-shading. In the instructions, wheels are painted in black, but that was boring, so I used black for the wheels and rubber black for the tires. Now comes the time to attach the decals. Quick disclaimer, I am not a Nazi fan or a Nazi member or have anything to do with Nazism, I just build models. and in this particular instance I used, well, the Nazi flag and the swastika on this tail portion of the aircraft. By the way, you don't have to put this one, you also have the Austrian version with the Austrian flag. I just went with this one. The application of decals is pretty much straightforward and simple, but first you really need to cover the model with clear gloss varnish so that the decals slide easily and freely. That way you also avoid silvering of decals later on in its life. For application of the decals, I used water to separate them from the decal sheet of paper and decal solution from Revell to soften them up, conform, and glue in place. I removed excess moisture with a moist cotton bud and just gently press down and around to make sure that the decal is nice and secure. After all the decals were applied, I went over them with another decal solution, this time from Tamiya, Mark Fit Strong, which softens them up even more and makes them conform even better. After that, I sprayed the whole model with semi-gloss clear from AK Interactive Real Color Assortment. The last three pieces to attach to this model are the two clear parts that represent the windscreens for the aircraft and of course the rotors on the top, and thus finishing the model. I would like to thank you so very much for watching. If you haven't, thank you for liking, commenting, sharing and subscribing, and I'll see you soon in the next video. Bye bye.